Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs.
Welcome everyone to another podcast, and we hope they really are helping you all the resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you with your teaching and making your professional choices using the fullness of the Australian curriculum. Great teaching can never be packaged into a program, we believe. Anyway, and please join our Facebook group if you haven't already, as well as listening to the podcasts, and maybe go back on the podcasts that you haven't heard yet. There's some real gold in some of them there. Gold in them hills. What do you think, Sharon? Yeah. Anyway, what about a chatty ramble? I think the chatty ramble would be about our trip to the Yorke Peninsula, which was a fantastic place.
Yes.
We went to Port Vincent, and then we drove all the way to the other side of the Yorke Peninsula and saw Port Victoria. And there was a museum there about the windjammers.
Yes.
What are windjammers, Sharon?
All right, now this will test whether I was watching, listening, and taking notice. I feel like you had far more investment in the knowledge about windjammers. But I do, well, actually, you can talk about the windjammers, but I did want to make reference to this fantastic display that they had about, so the windjammers being the sailing ships.
Oh, good, you know that.
Oh, yeah. I know there were sailing ships that kept. To what point did they sail through to Port Victoria? Into the middle of
right into the 1940s and 50s.
Into the 1940s. Wow.
Yeah.
And mostly carting grain.
Yeah, off to different cities in Australia and then overseas as well. It was a great. I never knew that was I knew Ardrossan was a pretty good big port for that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
Never knew about that.
But I particularly loved their representation of. They used the street that was visible from the museum, with the Norfolk pines growing down the median strip of that street to reference and help us understand the size of the windjammers and the masts and the...
Because it was a really wide street in Port Victoria, and they said the width of those sails was as wide as that street.
Yes.
That's incredible. I can't believe how big those sails must have been.
I know. And I thought, wow, that's such a good way for us, because I've always got my reader-writer hat on, thinking, what a tremendous way for us to reference the size of something or the expanse of something by the things that are in our own environment.
Yeah, that's good. And the sails, the masts were as tall as the huge pine trees that were in the street.
Oh, more than.
It
was twice the size.
Oh, twice then.
Yeah.
I just can't believe. And then sailors used to climb right up to the top of that rigging and unfurl the sails and all that sort of thing. And
yes.
Anyway, I think enough said about.
You've got seafaring blood in you, so.
I do.
Yes.
From Newcastle in New South Wales, Stockton.
Yes, I know. Well, nice little side fact here, but your great-grandfather,
yep,
were were
Oh, both were. Yeah.
Both were shipbuilders. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And started off in Stockton, building lots of sailing ships, also rescuing sailing ships and salvaging, all that sort of thing. Huge, and everyone in the family just loved ships and talking about them. Anyway,
Yes.
let's get on. Sorry.
I know.
Our topic today, Sharon, we thought we had such a wonderful session with Di Snowball last podcast that we thought we'd follow up on spelling and really go into a bit more detail with that and even more classroom help for teachers. I know Di just gave so many things. I mean, you could just go back to that podcast over and over again, couldn't you?
Oh, yes.
And you could wind back and just listen to some of the things, just gems that she gave us.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to just have a debrief, really, in a way, but also take it a bit further. But before we do that, do you want to talk a little bit about things that you've been doing in the schools recently, or a story from the schools?
So in this past week, I suppose, because at the time of recording this, it is a school holiday break. But what I've been doing in the last week has been meeting with and planning with lots of the principals that of the schools in which I'm working to really plan and personalise for the learning that's coming up in the next 10 weeks of school. So I just love that work of really
tailoring your work to what they need.
Yes, and that personalising, this is what we want for students. We want to look at where they are, what they're doing, how they're going with that, what their needs are, talking with them about those things. And so in that way, when the principals and I plan with each other, they've already got information about this is what teachers are saying and doing, and this is what they need, and as a school, this is where we're going. And so to really plan for next steps for learning around that really becomes targeted and focused, and love that these principals are so in tune and are using their teachers' voices to be able to help them in the best way to move on with their learning. So it's not just a blanket, everybody's going to get this, it's what does everybody need in that. So I love that challenge of, sorry, you want to say something, but I love that challenge of just like in the classroom thinking, how am I going to bring that learning, that just right learning to everybody, in the next steps that we take.
Yeah, and we know teachers, you as teachers will be thinking about, I know you have we all just don't want to think about school during our holidays. We just want to recoup and recover. But I know at odd times during the holidays, I have been doing it too. I'm thinking about this coming term, things I'm going to be doing, and I'm sure you are too, in your classroom, about your classroom and what's going to happen. Or you might have, in fact, got that organised before the holidays. But I know this is a key time to rejuvenate, replenish yourself. But also there's a little bit of a snippet of time there to think about what you're going to do in your classroom for this coming term. And we hope our podcast, because we know some people are going back to the podcast during the holidays and they are trying to catch up on them, because I know it's so busy to hear them during the term. But you could use these podcasts to help you in a part of that planning. We've been talking a lot about real practical solutions for reading and writing in the classroom. And anyway, that's what we're on about. Oh, you want to?
No, I just wanted to add that some people won't be listening to this in the holidays.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
But it is also about carving out some time for ourselves.
Yeah, whether you're on holidays or you're not.
Yes, on holidays. Yes. And yes, we're hoping, or we're hearing back from people, that lots of people are, we're joining people all around Australia, around the world, on their walks as people use that quiet time to have some time to, do some of that thinking and learning that in any given day, in any week, we have got a lot of... We've got a lot of stuff coming at us as teachers.
But we hope these podcasts really focus and provide something. We were just talking the other day about this being something that maybe, we've never had the opportunity to have before, because here we are with all the experience and knowledge and the guests that we have coming on and talking about some fantastic things to do in the classroom. It's only through a podcast that we've been able to do this. I mean, what was the other way? When we didn't have this, we would have to go off to a workshop or a conference, but here we are. You've got access to all these. We've up to a lot of podcasts now that you can access. So getting on to our topic today, Sharon, spelling. I'm calling it a closer look at spelling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Di talked about that, and I think if we think about, I think there'll be a lot of, I know that there is just, as he said, just this treasure chest of all the things Di talked about in the previous podcast. So I thought I'd sort of take a step into, like, what are the things that I'm most asked about when I'm working in schools?
Okay. Yep.
About, like, what steps can we take then? So knowing all of that wonderful information, what is it? So teachers will often say, look, I'm doing all this work in spelling, but I'm not seeing it being transferred into student writing. And I'm spending quite a bit of time each week devoted to spelling. Like, how much do I devote to that, and how do I make it connect so that I do see the transfer? And then it's also about, okay, and what are the important things for students to be learning about spelling? So, and that frequently translates into questions from principals then saying, look, what do we do with spelling across a school?
Yeah.
Because we want some sort of effectiveness, yes, around that.
Okay, Sharon, given that there's a whole lot that we need to explore here today, what should we start with first?
All right, so I thought one of the things that Di talked about in the previous spelling podcast was the importance of actually looking at student writing to help us find out what it is that children are actually doing with their spelling. Because given that that's why we, the major purpose for learning about spelling is because writers want others to be able to read their writing. So, which I think in itself is an important thing for us to actually make explicit to students, is that's why we do work on spelling. That's because we want others to be able to read our writing. That's why we, we pay attention to, and I think we need to make it clear to children that that's the purpose of writing, of spelling, because sometimes we can have that sitting outside of writing, and we have, okay, now it's spelling time, we do this work in spelling, but we're not connecting it. So by looking at student writing, so Di talked about a bit of a process for analysing student writing, and I think it's really worth a revisit of that this morning, or in this session, to say, okay, what is it that we look at? Because we can at times look at writing and think, okay, it's full of spelling errors, but what do we do about that? So by looking at it, we can start off with individual students. We can actually work out the percentage of words that they have correctly spelt in a piece. So to actually look at how many words are spelt correctly is actually a really important stance on saying, all right, we've got a lot that is being spelt correctly. Now, when we focus on what's being spelt correctly, and to be able to give that percentage, it also gives us a way of having a little bit of a, I don't want to say a benchmark, but
An assessment.
An assessment, a number on that to say, for this piece of writing, look at how much is spelt. So this is the percentage on this piece of writing. Now, looking particularly at the high frequency words and looking at how many of those are spelt correctly, is another way we can drill down into that piece of writing, because for some of those words that are being misspelt, some of them will be words that aren't used very often, but we also want to have a picture on how many of the high-frequency words are being spelt correctly. So when we think that 50% of all the writing we're doing is made up of high-frequency words, we want to make sure that they're the words that are being spelt most correctly, not most correctly, being spelt correctly, and with automaticity. Because if we're writing those words and they're making up 50% of what we're writing, we want to be quick, automatic and swift with those.
So we assess the students by looking at their writing to find out where they are in the percentage way.
Yes.
Yep. What else do we do?
Then we also want to, and I can as a class, if I'm looking across a class, I can also then look at, okay, which of the high frequency words are being misspelt most frequently.
Okay.
So that I can address that. I can bring those words to the class to say, okay, these are words that that we would need to learn. I can also notice what types of words are spelt correctly to see what students know about spelling strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So, do they listen to the sounds that they hear in the word and represent each of those sounds, especially for my younger writers? Do they have knowledge of common spelling patterns? Do they know how to add prefixes and suffixes to base words? Do they know about the spelling of contractions? So I can now look in to see what can they do? What do they know about that? Now, as part of the Teachific resources and as part of Di's article on evaluating students' writing, there's a fabulous checklist that we can use that's got all of the different, lots of those things that I've just talked about.
And if people want to know where those resources are, just go to the show notes of this podcast or the one with Di on spelling, and you'll find spelling links to our Teachific resources. Yep.
Yes, fantastic. So we can look at what students are doing correctly, and then we can look at what they've not spelt correctly, because both things are going to give us good information. So we can look at what's spelt correctly, what do they know about spelling, and then have a look at and analyse the misspellings so that we can then look at, well, what are the misunderstandings? So are there misunderstandings, or what are the things that we think, okay, they might not know about this?
Could some of these things be quickly taught to a child and then they move on? Or some things, like Di was saying, use a little mini whiteboard and have some practice at, spelling those words.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. But I'm just talking about analysis here at the moment. So finding out about, so it is finding out, so I can do it as a major analysis.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I can also, if I've got that bit of a checklist with me, I can at any time be looking at, where students are having trouble. But I also want to have some of those things in my mind so that I can bring those then to students, maybe as whole class or small group, as some of those strategies that we can use to fix those misunderstandings, or maybe some things that they don't yet know about. Mm-hmm. So then I would make the decision about, so once I've looked at student writing and analyse that, then that's the decision making I'm going to make. Is this something that I do? Are there whole class pieces here? Or, as you said, are there quick and easy? I might pull a small focus group to say all of these children, can very quickly have, whether it's small group or side by side with a child, to address that particular thing that we're noticing. So the important thing about looking at student spelling, though, is not only about what it is that we're about to teach them, but in all of this, it's about what spelling actions, what are the actions that we're teaching them and helping them to learn.
So when they're writing and they come across a word they want to write, they'll know an action
that
they're going to use for that particular word, and that will be in their head because of the the work you've been doing. Yep.
Well, yes. So we would say there would be two major strands then for teaching, the teaching of spelling, two things that we would want to plan for. So those two things are, and I'll talk more in detail, but number one, teaching children how to learn words.
Right.
And secondly, teaching children a range of strategies to work out how to spell unknown words.
Okay.
So, because when we're writing, we need strategies to know how, like there are words that we just need to learn how to spell. There are two things we want spellers to know. That's to know how to learn words and what strategies I can use when I'm trying to write a word that I don't know, an unknown word. So so if we think about those two, it's important for us to think about those two things, because in many of the spelling programs that we have, it's not teaching children how to learn words.
No, that's true.
And it's not necessarily teaching them the strategies for working out how to spell unknown words.
So yeah, really, and it's kind of, those programs are more of looking at a word and just memorising it, isn't it?
Yes.
Not giving them any of those other strategies.
Yeah. So that's because as writers, we want to be able to write with some fluency and automaticity of many words that we use a lot. So it's important to learn a lot of words. Now, when we say learn a lot of words, people go, okay, so I need to learn a spelling list of words. Actually, our important question to ask is working out what words are most effective for children to learn. So a spelling program might give us a list of words to learn.
Mm-hmm.
What we want our writers to learn to do is to know which words do they need to learn, and then how am I going to learn them. So when we have students, when we look at students' writing, we can have a look at what words do they frequently misspell, because they're the words that we would want them to learn. So if a child is always misspelling particular words, we can target those, but we want to now give them the strategies for how can they learn those words that they need. So we might catch that by them keeping a list. If they're younger, I would put the words on a list, but a words to learn list.
Mm-hmm.
Because not every child needs to learn the same words.
Okay.
But having a strategy for learning words is what we're really trying to teach. So if we want to teach a strategy, a good early learning strategy for learning a word is, some of us will know the strategy of look, cover, write, check. And a lot of us will say, oh yeah, give that to kids all the time. It doesn't make any difference to what they're, how well they'll learn those words. As a strategy, I just want to pull that apart a little bit about what it is that, as a word learning strategy, it's trying to ask us to do. And I love how Di has talked about, rather than calling it look, looking at the word, look, cover, write, check, she actually uses some different words around this. And the first word is, instead of look, is notice. So actually notice the word. Notice the features of the word. Notice, has it got tall letters, short letters? Has it got this many letters? Has it got spelling patterns in it? Has it got a capital letter in it? Does it begin with... So actually notice the word.
And I'm guessing modelling how you notice words is a really good strategy.
Yeah.
And the more practice kids have at noticing, like in this way, the better they're going to get. And I mean, if they're a student that has always been memorising and they've never and they've just had their list of 20 words, and they've never had any experience doing this. They're going to need practice. They're going to need the teacher modelling it and seeing other children do it. And it's going to be baby steps to start with, but they're going to need... This is going to empower them so much more than learning that list of 20 words.
Yeah, and we really need a word learning... We introduce word learning strategies from first year of school because we're going to take this strategy and we're going to keep revisiting word learning strategies all through the school, because this is a lifelong thing that we're going to be doing, is learning words, and we want an efficiency for learning words. We can't just use a strategy of sound out the word to write every word, because that's not enough for us.
Yeah.
We need to have strategies for learning words. So this notice, so old language, look, cover, write, check. New process, so notice, and then say the word. Say it, not just look at it. If we make that connection back to when we're learning words off a list, I've frequently had children who don't even know what that word is that they have learnt to spell. So to even say the word, what does that mean? We're just then learning a string of letters. So I notice it, look at that word, then I say it. And then I'm going to name the letters that make up that word. So if I've got the word because, all right, so let me notice it. Because, what it starts with, it's got this AU in it. That's a spelling pattern I may have seen before. Because, interesting. The S sort of makes a Z sound. It's got an E at the end. When I say it, because, I notice some more things. Now I'm going to name the letters that make that word, because that's how that's going to help me. That's how, if I said to you, Phil, how do I spell because?
I'd go BECAUSE, and I'm naming each letter.
Yes, because to give me the sounds of that isn't going to help me
spell it.
Isn't going to help me spell it. It's not going to help me remember. We remember the spelling of a word by the letter names. And I noticed you did something with that. You said BECAUSE. You actually broke it into some chunks.
True.
Don't know that you were aware of doing that.
I was kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So
I thought you were going to tell me I spelt it wrong. Phew. Lucky I'm safe, guys. Anyway.
So by spelling it, so we're naming it, name the letters, then we would cover it. Yep.
Why are we covering it? Just to let them try and visualise it?
So now in our mind, and actually I was just going to say back too that when we're spelling it out, that the way that you spelt it, it's almost a bit of a chant that we're doing, BECAUSE. We're not really doing BECAUSE. We're doing it with a bit of rhythm, with a bit of a chant, with a BECAUSE.
It's almost a song.
Yeah. And those things are ways for our memory to hold, to hold that. But we also, by noticing it, we're looking at that word and we are building a visual of the word.
Yep.
So that noticing is about building the visual, so that when we come to cover it now, we've got in our mind a visual and we've named everything, named all the letters. So now, as we come to write it, we're using both of those strategies. We're using the names and the way that we said that and the visual to now write out that word. And before we check it, let's have a visual check of it ourselves. Let's look at it spell it out again. Is that what I wrote? And then I can look at the word again and check it.
So instead of, we'd say notice to start with, the second one would be, instead of say, we just say name letters. It might be another title.
Say the word and then name. So
so it's another step.
So rather than look, cover, write, check,
Yep.
what we're really saying now is notice, say, name
the letters.
cover,
Yep.
write,
Yep.
check.
Great. I like it.
Yeah. And in that noticing, we can talk. You might have already heard me say things like, I noticed that the S makes a Z sound. Or, the C makes a K sound in this word. I might relate it to some of the sounds so that
gives another aid.
It gives, so the noticings is really being aware of the word, of sounds and letters and
range
all
of
these things that make this word.
Okay.
So,
and modelling it is so great, because then they get to see how this is, how an expert person does it.
Yes, yeah. So that process is a process that I can use with any word. And I'm not using it just once. I don't just use that notice, say, name, cover, write, check once and then I'm done. It's a strategy that I keep using with a word until I have got that to automaticity, which brings us to the idea of how many words then do we learn? Should we be learning at a time?
Is there a magic number?
So if we said that we were addressing, let's say because is one of my words that I need to learn because I am misspelling it. And we know that, we know this especially as teachers. I don't know how many times you've caught yourself going, all right, I've just written that word. Oh, have I spelt that correctly? Because I've seen it misspelt so many times by all the student writing that I've read that I'm not sure if that's spelt correctly now. For our writers who are misspelling words all the time, it's not going to be fixed with one little process like that. We are relearning how to spell that word. So we want to go through that process a few times, not just today I did it, now it's fixed. So over a week, or how long it takes until I become automatic with that word. I, as the writer, also need to start taking charge of that. So each time I'm writing that word, I'm thinking, there's that word. Let me spell that out. Let me name the letters as I write it. Now, I might need it anchored somewhere, so maybe on a personal word wall or on a Post-it note on the table, that's a word that I'm working on. But I need it there for me to, when I come to that word, I'm not going to write that the way I always did before. This is like creating the new habit. I have a word learning strategy that's going to let me know how to write that word.
Just as an aside, folks, if your students are creating their own personal word walls, we've got a great little resource on Teachific where you can make up a manila folder with
as a trifold,
and you've got your letters of the alphabet and so on. But we'll put a link on the show notes to that. So
yeah. So personal word walls are there in front of you rather than
on the wall, a long way away.
Yeah. Right, so that word learning, that as a word learning strategy is one that notice, say, name, cover, write, check is one thing that is suitable for any writer, for any word learner. What else might we do to teach children how to learn words? We can use a word structure strategy. And so as students become more knowledgeable about word structures, like onsets and rhymes, or how consonants and vowel sounds are represented, common spelling patterns, contractions, compound words, homophones, prefixes, suffixes, derivatives. When we've got more knowledge of those things, that also helps us to then look at words and go, so in this word because, I've been spelling it B-E-C-O-Z, say. Once I've got more knowledge of spelling patterns, then I can go, it's got the AU pattern in it. Right, so that's a common pattern in because. I see it in other words. Cause. I see it in the word cause. So, and it will appear in other words. So now what I'm actually doing is talking about analogy. If I know, so let me take, for example, if I'm learning the word could, because I misspell that, if I'm spelling it, maybe say C-O-L-D or C-O-U-D sometimes, however I might, or C-O-O-D, could, because I'm thinking, it sounds like good. If I'm teaching a word or learning a word like could, and I'm really learning that O-U-L-D pattern, spelling pattern, once I know that pattern, then I'm also knowing that, I can spell could, I can spell would, I can spell should. So using word structure can help me, not just learn one word, but learn, that's a structure that I can use for more than one
I talked
word.
about that too. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So using word structure. Now, we said there's two major strands about teaching of spelling. One is about teaching how to learn words, and the second one is teaching children a range of strategies to work out how they'll spell an unknown word, because we can't know the spelling of every word when we're writing. If we did that, that would really limit us. Like, we need to have a go at words, and it's the having a go of unknown words that we want students to become more strategic about. So we would talk about 3 strategies that students are using to, when they come to a word, when they want to write a word that they don't know how to spell, they could use a phonetic strategy so that they can use the sound-symbol relationship to represent. So for every sound they hear in the word, they'll use a letter or letters. So they may use a phonetic strategy. Or they might use a visual strategy. So they'll think, common spelling patterns that I know. So like in the word because, I know there's a spelling pattern in there, and sometimes we'll misfire with that. We'll go, I think it's got an A and a U, and sometimes I'll put a U and an A because I'm visually, I know that it's those letters, but I don't yet know which way around that is. So that's me seeing the early stages of students knowing that you can use that visual strategy. I know that those letters are in there, but I'm not sure which way round yet.
Yeah.
But it will help them to recognise, if they recognise lots of spelling patterns, then they have more to bring to unknown words. So it won't just be, and what spelling patterns can make different sounds. So I know 2 E's can make an E sound, or I know an EA can make an E sound, or I know an IE can make an E sound. So common spelling patterns will give me more ways into trying those words. And then, of course, I can use morphemic strategies. And morphemes, so words and their parts. So English is a meaning-based language. That means that our words are made of chunks of meaning. So we have bases, we have roots, prefixes, suffixes, plurals. We have those endings, to make words into plural. Sometimes the word changes altogether. We have contractions. So knowing all these different parts of words and that the meanings they have also help us to have a go at words that we don't know. So if I'm wanting to write shouldn't, and I know that, that's a contraction, that's going to give me, so that part of the word isn't just going to be shouldn't, isn't just going to be an NT on its own, it's a contraction, so it's going to have an apostrophe there of contraction in it. So I'm bringing, so phonetic, visual and morphemic strategies are the three that we want to teach students about using those strategies. How do I use a phonetic strategy? How do I use a visual? How do I use morphemic strategies? So they are really...
Well, it's giving the kids a repertoire of things that they can use. It's not just, I've learnt the spelling list and I've, memorised this particular word, and when I come to do my writing, hopefully I'm going to use that word in my writing. It's more about using words that they're going to use in their own writing and coming up with those broad range of strategies that have been taught to them.
Yes, yeah. So the shift is then from if we're teaching a list of words, that's really saying, well, you're going to have to know all of these. There's a lot of words you're going to have to learn before you're going to be able to spell and write successfully. Or we can say there are ways to learn the words that you need, and there are strategies to have a go at the words that you don't know. And we need our writers having a go at, we can't limit, you can only write the things that you know. We need them to know how to make, to have reliable and informed strategies for having a go. Not just a wild guess, but a solid guess, an informed go at this word. And that's all that knowledge that's about transfer then. If we say we want what we teach in spelling, we want to see it transferred into writing, then what we teach are the word learning strategies. So how to learn words and these visual, phonetic and morphemic strategies that help children have a go at words.
Right.
So then I just want to talk a little bit about, all right, so if we're teaching those, what kind of a sequence or what does that look like then across the year levels?
Yeah.
And I've already said one thing, because I also want to sort of talk, at a school level, what are we doing with spelling? Well, right there, they're the key things that we're bringing into that. And if we look to the Australian curriculum,
which you've got right in front of you, Sharon.
I have. From the learning area descriptions, I am never far from my year level. Well, I'm sitting with reception or foundation to year 7 here at the moment. But in each of the spelling categories, in the spelling box for each year level, the Australian curriculum constructs this we've got to remember that literacy means using and choosing. This is what we're empowering our spellers to do, to use word learning strategies and to choose which of the strategies is going to help me. Is it phonetic, visual, morphemic, that's going to help me have the best go at this word? When we look at the Australian curriculum, I really want people to read it from the spelling perspective of all the actions that it's asking students to use. So foundation starts off, understand how to use knowledge of letters and sounds, including onset and rhyme, to spell words. So it's about understand how to use knowledge of letters and sounds. That's all about transfer. That's not just learning letters and sounds. That's how do I use them when I'm writing a word.
Right, so it's right there in the curriculum.
Yes. Know how to read and write some high-frequency words and other familiar words. so know how to write them. So I've learnt how to write those.
Yep.
I've learnt how to read them. I think that's an important piece in there, and I think we got Di to talk about the importance of high-frequency words aren't just about reading them. It's about writing them. It makes up, as we said, over 50% of what they're writing. So I've just used foundation examples there, but any spelling, what am I here? Year 4, understand how to use knowledge of letter patterns, including double letters, spelling generalisations, morphemic word families, common prefixes and suffixes, and word origins to spell more complex words. There it is in the curriculum. So these are the pieces that we've just talked about. So I'm just going to do a quick run through across the year levels then, like what are the important pieces, when do we do these things, and what are the important, the most important pieces that we want to put into our spelling programs, and therefore as a school, what does that look like across, and I'm talking about the primary years here at the moment. I know secondary people will go, Sharon, you're not thinking about the secondary students here, but what I want you to think about there is when we look at student writing, what can we see that they are doing as spellers, and using that spelling analysis sheet that we talked about earlier will actually let us know what strategies they have got and which ones they don't. And therefore, we can start addressing at those levels.
Doesn't matter what year level, really.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, prep, foundation, reception, whatever we call it, the three big things that we're really focusing on there is the letter and word knowledge. So recognising and knowing, all the letter names and all the positions in words, both for capital and lowercase letters, how letters can make different sounds, not just the one. Then there's phonological awareness, which is hearing syllables and rhyming words, and really importantly, developing all that knowledge about onsets and rhymes. Now, this is going to sound like, okay, this is, I'm just mentioning this. Now, what about all of that work? In the show notes, you'll find Di's article on the importance of onsets and rhymes for writing and reading. And I can't point people in that direction, fast enough. It is such a crucial part. So where we might have students learning sounds and the letter-sound relationship, so onsets and rhymes in single-syllable words. The onset are the beginning letters, the rhymes, the ending letters. So in the word cat, the onset is the C and the rhyme is AT, the at. And so all that work with onset and rhyme is about analogy. If I can spell and write cat, if I take off the C, what can I use with at? I can also put in a B, bat. I can use R, rat. I can use S, sat. So I can use the rhyme, and there's a whole lot of really dependable rhymes that we can teach our students so that they can, if I know this rhyme, then I know a whole lot of words and I can spell a whole lot of words. So that's important, really important work for our receptions and into year ones. And year twos will get a lot out of that. So rather than learning everything letter by letter, we can be learning it by the rhyme. So common ones like at, on, it. 8.
Yep.
Lots of different rhymes. So that article, there's an article about that, and there's also a rhymes flip chart of doing that work.
So teachers can use that for their own mini lessons to teach.
Yes.
With big A3 sheets that have got a onset and rhyme for that page. And
yes, well, the rhyme, because of course the onsets we can change.
Oh, yes, yep.
Once we've got the rhyme there, we can make a whole lot of words.
Yep.
And we can talk about they're not always going to be, they'll. That's another whole conversation. Sorry, people. All right, so I'm just still on that first year of school, letter and word knowledge, phonological awareness, and learning words. So we want them to be learnt, like those high-frequency words. We're getting them to learn those words. All those words like hour, O-U-R. We can't use a phonetic strategy for that word, but I can learn it. O-U-R, hour. Saw, S-A-W. Saw. So learning words, just like we talked about before, that's a big strategy for our first year of schoolers to be learning. So year 1, we're going to be teaching them how to learn words, so learning word strategies. And then we're going to help them to use a phonetic strategy, and help them learn to use a visual strategy. So now we're starting to build up their strategies of looking in at words, not only using the phonetic strategy, but thinking about what does a word look like. So for words that students are seeing often in their reading, they can be encouraged when writing to think about what a word looks like. Because without a visual strategy, we're not drawing on all of these things that we have. So remember, going back to that word learning strategy, that's starting to build a visual strategy, because we need more than just memory to be learning words, and to be having a go at words. So looking, and visual strategies also help us focus in looking at onset rhyme, looking at smaller parts in a word that we may recognise. So all of these things, all of this noticing that we talked about in that word learning strategy is really helping to build visual strategy as well. Year 2, learning words again, and I'll point people also in the direction of, I'm going through a lot of things here without giving much detail, but Di has also, and on Teachific, there is another tremendous article called Spelling, a Suggested Teaching Plan, and all of the detail of this is in there, so that will give you much more at each year level, and it's totally linked with the Australian curriculum, so that you can make more sense of what it means to teach each of these as strategies. So year 2's...
So what's that called?
It's called Spelling, Suggested Teaching Plan.
Okay. We'll make sure that's in the show notes as a link. Yep.
Yeah. And this is a great one for teachers, for literacy leaders, and for school leaders to think about how are we scoping these things and sequencing these things across the year levels. So year 2, it's more learning words. It's using phonetic strategy and building on that, using visual strategy and building on that, and now also bringing into it using meaning strategy.
Right.
So understanding how words like compound words and contractions, and how prefixes, because words are made of chunks of meaning.
Yep.
So now we're really moving more into what those chunks are meaning, like prefixes and suffixes, and how do prefixes bring meaning to the word. Year 3, we're expanding all of the things that we've just mentioned. So learning words, phonetic strategies, visual strategies. But at year 3, the meaning strategy really starts to take on a lot of heavy lifting. It's probably one of the most useful strategies for students to be learning at this point. And for those of us that are finding we've got older spellers who are having some real difficulties, it can be lack of this knowledge that can lead to to a lot of their spelling mistakes. So if you've got older spellers and you're wondering, why has this come back to looking at the meaning strategy? So are they understanding how to add prefixes to base words? Are they understanding which homophones to use? Are they using knowledge of generalizations to form plurals? Do they know about plurals, and do they know, so working with base words now and adding to those to get the meaning? Is that, so we start with it, well, we do in year 2, we'd start working with some of that. Year 3, we're really starting to do a lot more work.
Ramping it up.
Yes. So then in year 4 and 5, it's continuing that learning words, so learning the words that they that they are continuing to misspell. We want to, or new words as they're expanding vocabulary, words they're using a lot that they are misspelling, so in their maths or in other content areas or in particular subjects or particular units of work where those words aren't yet solid. We want to be learning those words. So phonetic, visual and morphemic strategies, we're continuing to use those. In year 4 to 5, the majority of our work is going to be focused on the knowledge of how prefixes and suffixes are added to base words. So the whole idea of base words and prefix and suffix, and this, of course, is, we remember that words are made of chunks of meaning. So this is a real meaning strategy because each chunk gives meaning to the word. So we're now not only helping them as spellers, we're really helping them as readers as well.
Yep.
So a lot of, as I said, a lot of suffix work, prefix work, and not only giving them, it's not about giving them just add these prefixes and suffixes to words, but it's making generalizations about how they work. So how it, because we're not just adding, so it's like in that the word some work. If we're adding, if we start with a prefix and then we have the base word, and then what are we doing to that base? Do we need to change anything to that base word when we add the add the prefix, or is there anything we need to change to add the suffix to the word? So it's getting us making generalizations about how that works, because it isn't always like, what are the patterns to that? So that we're not just going the word unhappily, I'm not just adding ly to the end of that word. What do I need to do to add that ly? What are the generalizations about adding ly to a word that ends in a y? What? But we want students to explore that. We don't want to just give a list that says, right, now just add, what do you need to do to add the ly? We want them to explore that. So through a process of inquiry, and that's another podcast, that inquiry process of learning of how we can inquire about any of these things, whether it's about adding prefixes and suffixes or whether it's about a spelling pattern. Any of these things we can explore inquire.
Because I did mention with Di, we talked about it being the word learning as part of a writing session. You've got your writing workshop where they have plenty of time to do their own writing, but you kind of need your other little mini lessons on this inquiring into word learning, don't you, Sharon?
Yes, yeah. So, and they would be things that I'm bringing that as a strategy to the whole class.
Yep.
Where we're going to inquire, investigate about a particular, like at this age, year 4, 5, a lot of the inquiry will be about the prefix and suffix work. So doing inquiry about that, I can do that collectively as a class. So we can inquire, have an inquiry stance about a particular prefix or a particular suffix, and do that with different ones, but it's the process of doing that will help build the generalisations about how it works for that.
And this is the kind of work you'd be doing in a word or spelling book, rather than your list of 20 words.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you're right. This is, and I should link back to that this is like your word work piece, your word inquiry or your word study that you're doing.
Which is usually a daily event. Yeah? Not always?
No, I would. Across a week, I tend to talk about if in a day we have a reading and a writing workshop, and we've got 50 minutes a day for each of those. I'm talking Australia here because generally that's about the size of time that I'm seeing.
It's a lot longer
most
in the
schools,
US.
Most schools giving. But across a week, to the word work, part of it, word study, I might want to dedicate, 50 to 60 minutes across a week.
Right. So it could be in 2 sessions or
it might be in 3, or it might be, but there is also work around spelling going on during the writing time. What words am I using here? What strategies am I using as I'm writing?
And when you're conferring with students, you're talking about those things in a writing session.
Yes,
and they're also collecting words on their little personal word wall. That's another thing they're doing too, isn't it? During a writing session.
What do you mean by collecting?
Well, words that they're struggling with.
Right. So on a word wall, I may put on words that I'm seeing students misspelling.
Yep.
If I'm seeing in their writing they're using it a lot, I'll use Sarah as an example, a year 6 child that I was working with, who in the writing that I was looking at, she was writing about a guinea pig and she was misspelling it every time she was writing it. So we just put onto her word wall guinea pig so that it was a word that we could have put on her words to learn list, but we put it on the word wall so that every time she wrote guinea pig, she knew she just had to look at the word wall to write the word guinea pig. Now, by the time she finished working on this piece on guinea pigs, she was spelling it correctly because she was referencing back all the time. In fact, what she'd done was learnt. She'd actually learnt the word, but by giving it to her. So sometimes words on the word wall can be there to absolutely, if we're using it a lot and I can see, or sometimes they'll ask, I'm writing about this, I don't know how to spell it, I'm going to be using it a lot. I might get them to have a go at it, but then sometimes I might just give it to them because if I'm teaching strategies, then they've already had a go at it because they've written it down. Now I'm saying, okay, I can talk to you about that word, but let me just put it here on the word wall so that you've got it, and then you can learn from there.
And then there's a words to learn list, which can be another list. It's part of
ones that I intentionally. So during the week, I really want to remember we asked ourselves the questions, how many words should we learn in a week? If I could actually have students truly noticing, saying, naming, covering, writing and checking a word to a learnt stage, if I just had them do one word in a week, that could mean 35 words that I now write correctly that I didn't write correctly before.
Because
I've learnt it.
You learnt how to spell that particular word.
Yeah.
It's helped you with another 30 words.
No,
Yep.
I'm just saying over a year, that may be 30 words that I now don't misspell, but you're also saying that for every word that I'm learning, if we are giving them all of these other strategies, the phonetic, visual and morphemic strategies, then yes, now that I know that, yes, now I also know this, and this word. And as I'm doing all that meaning work with them as words, as chunks of meaning, for every time I've got a base word and I'm adding prefixes and suffixes to it, that's another word. If I know how to spell the base correctly, look at all the other words that I can be.
Well,
so it just keeps building.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a bit of maths here. If you were learning 20 words a week through the traditional way, you'd say do 800 words in the year. But in this way, where we're teaching them strategies, it's thousands of words they're learning because they've got the strategies to learn many more words than that fixed amount of words that you might be memorising, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's always coming back to how we're learning. What are we giving, what actions can they be taking to, and the talk that we're doing with them.
Through a repertoire of strategies rather than this singular way that's limiting.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And then, so that's year 4, 5. So lots of that work with prefixes and suffixes. And then year 6 and up, all of those things again, learning words using phonetic, visual and morphemic strategies. We want them to just keep building on those. And then we can extend further with that use of meaning strategy. So all that suffix and prefix, making more generalisations with more complex suffixes and prefixes that we're adding there. Root words, so the Greek and Latin roots and the meaning that they hold. So if we know, if we know the meaning of like the root STRU, stru, or STRUC, struck, if we know that means to build, then that helps me with the word structure, instruction, construct. It helps me not only spell it, but it helps me know that the meaning to build, instruction, to build, instruct, to build knowledge, construct, if I'm going to construct something to build.
I thought of the word photo, means light.
Yes.
So all those words that come from the Latin or Greek.
Yes.
Yep.
So, but they're also, knowing the roots. So we've got base words, but then roots, the roots of words, different again. The origins of words. So the etymology and the history, that gives us more into the meaning and as a meaning strategy. So which word, so if I know medic, and so then that's going to help me spell medicine and medical, because that word part, medic, has a meaning, and so I use that to do others. Now, we haven't even talked in all of this One of the really important things that in analysing student writing, one thing that I'll mention now that is also really useful to get our students to do is let me have a look at that piece of writing, but then also let me see what they do if I say, I want you to proofread that piece of writing. What can you do to fix it? What do you notice? So that actually gives me another whole layer of information about what strategies they have to go back to their own work, to what phonetic, visual, morphemic strategies and have they got to go back to, because we want them to not only be able to use these strategies as they're writing, but we also want them to use them to fix up their writing. So the use of that, so we don't need to teach it as the best place for them to learn proofreading is in their own writing, not for us to give them a piece of writing that we've put errors in to proofread. It's even better if they can proofread their own writing, but for us to teach them the strategies to use to proofread writing.
Yep. Because the engine that's driving everything in literacy is that every child has their own reading to do and their own writing to do in a session, and all these things work within that if you've got that basic engine running.
Yes.
If the engine's not running,
you
can't get these other wonderful things happening.
Yes, yeah, that's such a good connection, Phil. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, because
Thank you.
Go on. Because we want, because spelling is important for writers, we want it to work within the writing, and we know that it empowers readers, and we know that all of these things are connected. So, yes, the action and the use, we want it to be seen in that connected way rather than the spelling sits over here, the writing sits over here, and the reading sits over there, and we're not seeing how strategies connect across them.
Yeah, we hope we've taken you a little bit deeper today in spelling, but at least there's a couple of further podcasts that we've identified that could come out of today's podcast, as often happens. But I think, Sharon, we'll just go on to our key question 2, which is, what's a good tool that you've used in the classrooms with teachers?
Okay, well, we've already mentioned, but all of Di's resources, as well as the onset and rhyme chart that we've mentioned in today, we'll list all of those, as you said, in the show notes, because there is a wealth of information that you can follow up on from not only resources that I've used here, and the other piece that I highly recommend, so there's the analysis article, the onset and rhyme article, the suggested spelling plan, and the one called Teaching and Learning About Spelling.
Yep.
Are all just really solid articles. And in fact, someone who on the Facebook page asked about some spelling, pointed them in the direction of these. Di and Faye Bolton also have written the book Spelling K-8.
Yep.
Isn't readily available so much anymore.
I did find it on Amazon, so
right.
I've got a link to the show notes on that.
Okay,
Yep.
Terrific.
Also, we did mention through the podcast some Teachific hands-on tools like the personal word wall,
yep.
And there might be other things. Just look at the links on the show notes.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of spelling pattern inquiry and investigation pieces, so that's another place. Or explorations. I think we've called it spelling explorations.
As a category.
So
if you just go into spelling explorations, that must be under writing? Or is it?
Under spelling.
Oh, under spelling. Very good. That would be a good thing to explore.
Yes.
Now, a text that you've come across.
Okay, so I want to share such a fun text that's a recent purchase for me. It's called It's Quite True. It's based on Hans Christian Andersen's tale, of the same name. And this one's been retold by Liz Matheson and illustrated by Judith Price, two Western Australians who've created a wonderful retelling of this tale with quite a modern twist. In fact, it's got quite an Australian feel to it, as well as, it's got an Australian feel to it because it's in an reimagined in an Australian setting. But this is the story of what happens when we overhear something, mishear it, and then pass it on, and then what's finally told in the end is nothing like it was to begin with.
Chinese whispers. Very
much like Chinese whispers. So this story starts with a comment a hen made while watching one of her feathers fall to the ground. A rumour begins in the hen house on one side of the valley. She has overheard but misheard, yet her comments passed on, which was overheard yet again by others and passed on through the bush telegraph, as we call it in Australia, to the neighbouring hen houses, growing more exaggerated each time it's been retold until it eventually comes back to the hen house where it all started. Now, the very nice modern nod here is to the perils of social media in the rapid transfer of rumour mongering.
Oh, right.
So Facebook and Twitter is how these little messages make their way around the hen houses.
Great.
So it's beautifully illustrated, great retelling, and all that beautiful language of Hans Christian Andersen retained. So one of them was a speckle-feathered, short-limbed hen. She was proper and respectable in every way. She quietly went about her business, laying her egg every day, exactly the way she was meant to. As she settled on the perch, she preened and prettied herself and plucked out a tiny feather. "There it goes," she said, with a little cluck, and she watched it float to the ground. "The more I pluck, the more beautiful I will get. There's no doubt about that." But she meant it only in a fun way, for she was a fun hen who liked to have a joke. And then she fell asleep. And there the story. It's not where the story begins, but it's where the first message is overheard and misheard and passed on.
Such fun.
Oh, it is.
Right.
It's a lovely, lovely story.
Love that. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. It's been a wonderful podcast on spelling, and I'm sure there's going to be other podcasts coming out of it. And please join us on our various platforms. The word teacher in Swedish today, la lela. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time. See you, Sharon.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.